r/nosleep. Hosted by you/Superfan1. I think I died. Part 1. After a long, deep, gasping breath, the world came rushing in, spinning like a whirlpool. My senses returned to me all at once and I felt like I was going to throw up. My mouth was even drier than the Sahara and my tongue was so swollen I could choke any minute on it. A dark earthy and metallic smell flooded my nostrils. The sensation of little ticklish pricks of grass on my hand with specks of dirt under my fingernails registered to my brain. I had felt a small breeze blow past me and I shivered. This was when I realized my clothes. I had on a light gray hoodie with what looked like a school name, dark ripped blue jeans, and black and white Converse that were caked in mud were torn and covered in dark brown stains. I stood up and looked around. I was in a ditch by the side of a dirt road surrounded by never-ending tall green stalks of corn. Speaking of who am I? I hadn't remembered anything except for what had occurred in the mere moments I'd been awake. Another swift breeze blew through and I figured I needed to find shelter. It looked like the corn stretched for 1,000,000 miles in all directions, so I just picked a direction and started walking alongside the road. It was pitch black but the cacophony of stars were out which illuminated the plain landscape enough for me to see where I was going. I walked for a long time, at least I thought it was, but I couldn't help but feel strange. It felt like I shouldn't have been able to walk for as long and as far as I had. I tried to wrap my brain around the weird feelings I was having, but I just couldn't remember anything. I didn't have the slightest inkling of who or where I was. Did I have family looking for me? Why was I out here? I knew common things, like what language I spoke and the year, but why couldn't I remember things about myself and my life? The only thing I could piece together was that I had long black curly hair, or at least the tips were, because I could see it out of my peripheral vision. My thoughts were interrupted when a sweet yet savory smell wafted through the air right past my heart and into my stomach. Somehow I managed to drool a little even though my mouth craved hydration. I also noticed lights about 60 feet away. The lights were porch lights attached to a ranch-style farmhouse. I sheepishly approached the house, my stomach rumbling louder as the sweet scent intensified. The porch light was on, which I knew meant somebody was home, and the familiar and comforting smell solidified the fact. But even I knew my appearance would irk most people and I didn't know how the person or people in the house would react. However, the need for water and food was starting to take over my thoughts. I quietly walked onto the wraparound porch and peeked in the window by the door. There was a white but very thin curtain over the window so I could still see in, but it wasn't totally clear, but it was enough. My stomach grumbled again and I knocked on the door lightly. My thoughts began racing as I waited to see if someone would open the door. Even though the feeling of my heart slam dunking itself against my chest and my palms becoming clammy was uncomfortable, it felt familiar, which was a little comforting. The sun-bleached red door suddenly opened and I was met face to face with a boy. He was about a foot taller than me and had short sandy brown hair with light green and a hint of hazelnut eyes. He had a small beauty mark just above the left side of his pink upper lips. I stared at them as my mind drew a blank. He was wearing a pink apron and underneath was a black t-shirt and light jeans. At first he looked confused, but it quickly turned to a mixture of panic and sympathy. May I help you?" he stuttered out. I could tell he was off-put by me, but another burst of sweetness filled the air. I felt my mouth water with the little bit of moisture that was in there. Another loud growl escaped from the depths of my empty stomach. "Food," I said quietly. I looked down, suddenly overcome with embarrassment. The boy opened the door a little wider. "Come in. I'm making some cornbread." He led me to a round table with a red, almost pink, and white tablecloth. It was made with spruce and was on the lighter side. I sat down on the comfortable chair, my body finally taking in how exhausted it was. Mid-admiration of the table and surprisingly open layout of the kitchen-connected dining room, I jumped when a glass of water was suddenly placed in front of me. I looked up frantically at the boy. Sorry," he muttered. It finally registered what was in front of me and I swiped the glass off the table and started gulping the delicious water inside. I was done in seconds and the boy went and got me 2 glasses of water after I finished the first one. "So what's your deal?" he asked, crossing his arms as he sat down in the seat in front of me. I just looked at him inquisitively. "Are you alright? I mean? You look awful. Your clothes are ripped and you're dirty, not to mention you smell really girthy." I shrugged my shoulders. "I woke up in a ditch like this and walked here." His eyes widened. "A ditch? Are you okay? What's your name?" "I don't really know my name. I can't remember anything from before since I woke up there." "So you have amnesia?" "I've heard that people experience memory loss after suffering traumatic events and stuff. And no offense or anything, but you look like shit." "None taken. I don't really know what happened so I can't be sure. If something traumatic did happen though, Shouldn't it be best to not try and remember? I responded. He looked like he was about to say something, but a ding rang out from the kitchen. Ooh, my cornbread is done, the boy said excitedly as he jumped up and ran to the kitchen, completely forgetting what he was going to say. I watched as he took the dish out of the oven. He began to cut into it with a silly little smile on his face and returned with a small round dish with 2 blue circles lining it. It was filled with perfect golden brown squared of cornbread. Dig in, he said, throwing his hands up in the air. Don't mind if I do. I grabbed a piece and stuffed it into my mouth. It was still too hot, so I ended up huffing in air like an idiot. I gulped the fluffy delicious treat down my gullet and then took a big sip of water. My cheeks felt hot as the boy laughed at me from across the table. So what's your name? I asked to change the subject. I took another piece and only chewed half of it before plopping in its other half. Sean Briggs at your service, he said with a little bow. I chuckled and picked up a third piece and tossed it in my mouth. Sean took 1, 2 and ate while staring at me. Well, I guess in the meantime I'll call you Jane, he said suddenly. Why Jane? I asked. He answered with, it's a common name given to people who can't be identified. Jane Doe for girls and John Doe for boys. Jane Doe. I muttered to myself. I stuffed another crumbly piece of cornbread into my mouth. My stomach was feeling very happy and I felt okay, not truly safe but good enough. How do I know you're not going to hurt me or my parents? Sean asked cautiously. How do I know you and your parents won't hurt me? I retorted. He let out a nervous chuckle. True, he said, crossing his arms again. He was leaning back in his chair. It looked like he was comfortable at the very least. I couldn't be sure if he was off guard though. We had just met after all. I guess we'll just have to trust one another, I said matter-of-factly, a hint of challenge in my voice. Yeah, I mean a girl with amnesia can't be too dangerous, right? He let out a small smile. Where are your parents anyway? I inquired. They're in town getting their car fixed. A buck ran into the middle of the road and they crashed into it. Messed their car up pretty badly too. He explained. I said sympathetically, dang, hope they're alright. They're just a little banged up, nothing too major, he continued. I'm wondering what kind of rental car they'll pick. It must suck too because they bought that car last month. I let out a small To be honest, with the warm food in my stomach and exhaustion, I was trying my best to stay awake, basically tuning out of the conversation. I think he noticed because he stopped and took my hand. Come on, let's get you cleaned up before you pass out. My parents probably won't be home for a while anyway. I sleepily agreed and dragged my feet to where he led me to the bathroom. The warm water cascading down my back felt amazing. The water pressure was just magnificent. As the water slowly turned from a dark brown back to clear and soapy suds lined my body, I felt a little more normal than before. When I got out and dried, Sean had left me a pair of underwear, a wool t-shirt and long black shorts, all of which were big on me. I stared into the mirror, the face looking back at me unfamiliar. My wet slicked back black hair went just past my shoulder blades. I had inviting dark green eyes which matched beautifully with my hair and was accentuated with little brown spots speckled around my face. I hated what looked back at me, even though I thought the face was attractive. I could see innocence in the face, but the eyes looked scarred. Leaving the bathroom was my only option at that point. I walked down the hallway that led into the living room and found an open door. It seemed to be Sean's room. It was a nice size and had 2 windows, one adjacent to the door and one directly across. His bed was under the window and pushed against the wall. He had a dark blue comforter and sky blue pillowcases which went nicely with his dark wood floors. He had a desk with some papers on it with a MacBook straight in the middle of it. He had no posters or anything lining the walls. He came out of his closet and noticed me in the doorway. My parents would kill me if they knew I let someone in the house without them knowing. Farm folk tend to be overprotective here, since it's kind of isolated. So you'll have to sleep in my closet for now until I can figure out how to successfully let my parents let you stay, he said, clapping dust off his hands. I nodded and made my way over to the closet. Underneath his clothes laid 2 white pillows and a few blankets laying on top of one another. I'm hoping it'll be comfortable enough for you, he said, putting his hand behind his head. Thank you. It's not a problem. A tear slips from my eye. Thank you. Hey, what's wrong? He asks as more tears escape from behind my eyelids. My situation sucks and you're just such a nice person. You're the first one to help me and I just appreciate it so much. I sob. He grabs me and brings me into a hug. His chest was firm and I felt heat return to my cheeks. It's alright. You're safe here, okay? We'll figure out what happened and then you can go home. But for now you're sticking with me. I wiped my face off and laid down in the closet. It was better than the cold hard dirt I was laying in earlier. I closed the doors and let out a soft good night, before falling into a deep sleep. It was blackness. A never-ending void. Then suddenly a burst of blinding bright white light. I sat up and was met with a face full of hanging shirts. Light from the window shone through the closet doors and into my face. I sighed and quietly got out of the closet. Sean's bed wasn't made and he wasn't in the room. The door was closed too. It was an eerily thick quiet. Something I felt I wasn't used to. Even last night there was the choir of bugs and animals to entertain my ears. I searched around the room and found a note on his desk. It read, "I had to go to school, but don't worry. We all leave together and then I ride my bike home from school. Since I'm a senior I can leave early so I'm normally home around 1. Plus my parents don't come back for a few hours so you should be okay. Eat, drink, and explore until I get home. Sean." I exited the room and relieved myself in the bathroom. I then walked around the house a little more. I found the master bedroom further down the hall. It was nice. The home was filled with beautiful furniture and expensive looking things, which is why I can understand why they'd be wary towards visitors. I found my way towards the kitchen and opened the fridge. After searching for the plates and cups, I sat at the table and ate some more cornbread and sipped some milk. I then returned to Sean's room and fixed his bed for him. I tidied the papers on his desk and gathered the laundry that littered the floor into a pile in the corner. Cleaning his room was the least I could do since he took me in. I wandered back into the living room and watched some television. The news was going on about how people weren't able to leave town because of mandatory construction. They put up a whole blockade and had officers guarding it to make sure people wouldn't leave. They even had tire spikes set up to stop any cars from barreling through. It was creepy they were putting so much defenses up, but at the same time people go crazy when you try to tell them what to do. Especially since nobody could come in or out. There was only one road that came in and out of town too. Feeling depressed after another hour of news and learning that a 9-year-old got shot and a conscience store was robbed and a kid died for the $20 he had on him, I turned the TV off and went on to explore outside. The land was flat and full of corn and wheat. About 30 feet from the house was a barn and chicken hen. I went into the barn first and found 2 cows, a pig, and a horse. I let the horse sniff my hand and felt the warm air puff on my hand. It sent tingles down my spine. A bright smile was plastered on my face as I left to go see the chickens. Some were eating leftover kernels, while others just played and socialized. I saw a few of them sleeping inside the little house area protecting their young. I then felt the urge to go play in the corn and frolic in the wheat. I felt the fat waxy leaf of the corn tap my shoulders and sides as I ran pretending to run away from an alien. And I rolled around in the ticklish wheat and laughed until I couldn't anymore. I was having fun and was at ease. I felt like a farm dog relaxing after a hot long day. I saw Sean waiting for me by the back door as I returned from the wheat field. "Having fun?" he asked. I gave him a slight nod and smile. "I love your horse," I shout as I get closer. "Oh, you mean peanut butter? She loves everyone. She's my favorite animal here too," he shouted back. "Anyway, I'm going to make lunch if you want to shower and change." I nodded and followed him inside. I couldn't help but think about food the whole time I was in the shower. I was pretty hungry after all my frolicking. Sean had left me a modest pink dress with white lilies adorning it. It was pretty and looked really good on me. When I entered the living room, a ham sandwich and some chips were calling my name. I devoured them and then chugged the Coke Sean gave me. I was still pretty hungry, but I didn't want to be rude. It would also be suspicious if a large amount of food started going missing. I thanked Sean for lunch and we talked about his day. Nothing interesting happened at his school except for a fight. We watched some TV and when his parents came home I went back to the closet. Sean gave me a book and a small flashlight so I could read it while I stowed away in his wardrobe. A few hours passed and Sean had brought me dinner, which consisted of pork chops, mashed potatoes, and green beans. I thanked him as I started to eat in my little hobbit hole. I grabbed the fork to start eating but a searing white hot pain caressed my hand as I touched it. "Ow!" I yelped. "What's wrong?" Sean said, coming back to the closet to check on me. "I think I'm allergic to this metal or something," I told him. He said. "Let me see if I can find something else." He then grabbed the silverware and left the room. He came back moments later. "Here," he said, giving me a plastic fork. I thanked him and ate my meal. I was still pretty hungry from lunch and boy did this hit the spot. I eventually dozed off to sleep while Sean played on his phone. I was kind of jealous because my phone wasn't on me when I woke up. While it would also provide me entertainment, It would also have clues about who I was and the kind of person I was. What happened to me? I kept thinking. Why can't I remember? My bladder woke me up. It was the middle of the night and Sean was fast asleep. I tiptoed out of the bedroom and to the toilet. When I was done, a twinge of hunger rang through my tummy. It had been a few hours since I last ate. I quietly made my way into the kitchen, heart pumping, as I opened the fridge. I was hungry, but nothing looked good to eat in there. I had a craving for something though, I just couldn't pinpoint what it was. I was surprised I was so hungry. I was tiny and the thought of me having a big appetite seemed ironic. Deciding on not eating anything, I figured I'd go for a walk to get some fresh air and soothe my thoughts. They'd been racing since I went to bed. I've been consciously trying to pry past the wall that kept me from my memories. The walk was long and calming. But my body suddenly tensed as a white light flashed into my eyes. The black void was back, the sudden light blinding. I couldn't breathe. My lungs burned, my legs ached. Pain and full aches riddled my body. I felt panic and anxiety flush through my veins. My heart skipping beats left and right. It was dark again. I was on the road. My shadow was illuminated by a light behind me. It was approaching fast, really fast. I turned around and there was light, 2 lights. Headlights. I suddenly see the car barreling straight towards me. It didn't have enough time to dodge. I came back, stars littered the sky as I looked up at them. My body was being shaken intensely. Jane? Jane? What's wrong? Talk to me. Sean whisper yelled as his shoulders grasped mine. He was looking me straight in the eyes, worry settled into them and panic in his face. My name, I said breathlessly, my gaze falling to the ground. My name isn't Jane, I stated, taking in a deep breath. I looked back up at Sean. My name is Brianna. Posted by you/Superfan1. I know how I was killed. Part 2. Sean took a step back to give me some space. You remembered your name. Oh Brianna. You remembered. He silently cheered, still recognizing it was the middle of the night. I finally noticed the flashlight in his hand and realization struck when I determined the cause of my sudden flashback. Do you remember anything else? No, just my first name. I lied. I remembered my name, yes, but I vividly recalled the car heading right for me. If I concentrated enough, I could feel an enormous and sudden pressure on my chest and abdomen. How am I supposed to explain this to Sean? I'm pretty positive that I got hit by that car, and with the way dread is settling into my stomach, it was a lethal accident. But if it was, I should be dead, right? Am I a zombie or something? I'd look like a total loon in front of Sean if I confronted him with all of this. He'd definitely kick me out and I didn't want to lose this. Sean stuck his hand out in front of me. Well Brianna, it's nice to meet you. I grabbed his hand and pulled myself up off the ground. He smiled widely and led me back into the house and safely into his closet. He seemed to fall back asleep at ease, but I didn't really sleep much. I was deeply unsettled still, and something in my gut didn't feel right. I knew something was wrong, but the wall in my head wouldn't relent. But I think what happened last night caused a tiny crack, which made me feel a little better. I felt more at ease when Sean and his family left to start their day. I hated that I was imposing on him. He had a full life outside of his house, high school friends and events and such. He was probably already exhausted by the time he came home, but had to take care of little amnesiac me. Another uncomfortable familiar feeling. A little bit of me must be seeping out of the crack. I eventually fell asleep again. I woke up and stretched, hitting my hand on the wall, forgetting I was in a tight enclosed space, but was relatively refreshed. I continued my routine from yesterday. The little blue numbers on the oven said it was 10:30 when I entered. I grabbed a glass of water and stared into the fridge, debating what I should eat. If I ate cereal, it's quick and easy to clean up. If I ate leftovers, Sean's parents might get suspicious, and if I made bacon and eggs, they could also get suspicious. I decided to risk it and started to prepare bacon and eggs because I was really hungry. Plus there weren't many leftovers to begin with and cereal wouldn't be filling enough. Besides, I'd sneak into the henhouse and replace the eggs I took. With the bacon, I was hoping they wouldn't remember how much was left. I'd clean and put the dishes away when I was done so it looked like everything was untouched and where it should be. I grabbed a frying pan and put 4 strips of bacon in. Pretty soon the smell of the delectable bacon filled the air and my tummy grumbled in anticipation. Once the bacon was to my preferred crispy texture, I took them out of the pan and placed them on some paper towel. Next, without emptying the leftover bacon grease, I added a little butter to the pan and then cracked in my eggs. I used the spatula to scramble my eggs and added in season and a handful of cheese. By the time my eggs were done, I had snacked on all my pieces of bacon. So I grabbed 4 more pieces of bacon and continued to cook them. It was 10:55 when I finally sat down and scarfed down my meal. It was so delicious that I ended making myself seconds. I was full and I wanted to savor the taste in my mouth, but I felt really guilty for eating as much as I did. I made my way to the bathroom to glare at myself. A small bump showed under the dress I was wearing where my flat tummy used to be. I was disgusted in myself and was self-loathing in the mirror when, like a reflex, I headed towards the toilet. I shoved 2 fingers down the back of my throat and ended up spewing everything I just ate. I felt a lot better when it was done, the taste of grease and bile staining my tongue. I wiped my mouth off and exited the bathroom. I went to the barn and checked in with Peanut Butter. She was a little more wary of me today, but after she sniffed my hand a little more we were best buds again. I would love to ride her one day. I gave her soft and gentle pats on her snoot and she neighed and jumped in glee. When I was content with catching up I made my way to the wheat fields. I walked along them with my arm outstretched and my fingertips brushing up against the long wheat. It was almost time to harvest them. I don't know how I knew it, but I did. The bright golden sun was shining on my face and I enjoyed it. A nice warm and comforting feeling filled me. A sunlit smiling face emerged from the wheat. He looked little, but familiar. I felt comfortable and safe with him, not scared at all. We laughed and played through the wheat together for hours, chasing each other around and hiding in the comfort of the ticklish wheat. He had light brown hair and light brown eyes, his face covered in freckles. He had the deepest and cutest dimples I'd ever seen. He was about 5 feet in front of me, laughing and smiling, when a sudden gust of wind blew him away. The world became a little darker when he left. I snapped back into reality and realized I had another flashback. I knew this boy and I felt a sense of loneliness in my heart. I don't think I'd seen him for a while. I made my way back towards the ranch when I remembered I had to replace the eggs in the fridge. I slowly made my way towards the fenced-in hen house, unsure of how these animals would react to my presence. Surprisingly, they didn't try to escape or anything. In fact, they kinda ran away from me. It saddened me a little and I felt offended, but I had a task to do. The chickens pecked at me a few times, but I managed to grab the 6 eggs that were needed. I took in a deep breath of farm air when I exited the fence, a little sense of accomplishment filled within, but the moment was soon ruined when my stomach growled again. I let out an annoyed groan and went back inside with the eggs. I didn't feel like eating again after this morning, but my stomach begged me. I put the eggs in their respected container and then searched the fridge for something to nibble on. Nothing interested me though, so I looked in the freezer. Maybe I could microwave a Hot Pocket if I got lucky. Instead, I found a bunch of frozen vegetables and some packages of meat and a cut-up chicken. I sighed and looked down at my woeful stomach. I stared at the raw chicken in its blood-filled plastic bag. Before I knew it, I had grabbed it, shut the freezer, and placed it in the counter. I opened the and smelled the cold air that came out. A tingle went throughout my whole body. What the hell? I yelled at myself in my head, but my body was on autopilot. Nothing was going to get through. I found the smallest piece of wing and shoved it into my mouth. It was cold, crunchy, and chewy. The texture was unpleasant at first, but it grew on me. I swallowed and it's like an invisible itch I couldn't reach was scratched. I still wasn't satisfied though, and before I knew it, piece after piece of chicken went into my mouth. When there was nothing left but blood in the bag, I drank it. Chugged it down like water and let out a satisfied groan. I slumped down to the floor and leaned against the cabinets that lined underneath the counters. I was extremely tired and full. After a minute of pure bliss, the reality of my situation stung me like a wasp. I quickly stood up and once again made my way to the bathroom. It looked like a scene out of a horror movie. The corners of my mouth were wet with melting ice flakes and dried blood dripped down from my chin and onto Sean's mom's dress. I undressed and started a shower. I scrubbed every inch of myself twice, but I still felt dirty and disgusted by what I did. Why did I do that? I chided myself. What in the utter fuck just happened to me? I started crying, my tears blending in with the water running down me. Why did I enjoy it so much? When I was done cleaning myself off, I grabbed the dress and headed for the laundry room. I had made myself quite familiar with the house in case I needed to hide on the spot. I grabbed dish soap from the sink and began to rub the side into the dress in hopes to get as much blood out as possible. It was a good thing the dress was a shade of red. When the dress looked satisfactory, it was thrown in the washing machine and then made its way into the dryer. As the dress was being scrubbed of the atrocities I'd committed in it, I cleared the evidence I left behind and threw it in the trash, making sure to cover it with a dirty paper plate. I made my way back to the dryer, 5 minutes left in the cycle. I then heard footsteps approaching the front door. I glanced at the clock, it was 1:25. I'm back, Sean stated as he entered the house. He threw his backpack on the couch. Brianna? He asked loudly when he didn't find me in his closet. He must have picked up on the sound of the dryer and made his way closer. My heart started to race when the realization hit me that I was in nothing but a towel and he was coming closer. I just ate a raw chicken and this is what my mind is freaking out over. Sean starts, but his words come to a halt when he sees me. I muttered out stupidly. The dryer dinged. I quickly opened the door and grabbed the piping hot dress. See, can you turn around? I ask, as small as a mouse. My ears grow warm as I stare at my feet. Yeah, sure. Sean says as B awkwardly spins around, almost tumbling to the floor. I take the uncomfortably warm dress and slide it back on. Thankfully the blood washed out and the dress looked like normal. A strong scent of lilac filled my nostrils as I pick off the scented dryer sheet off the side of the dress. Feeling embarrassed and mortified, I took the towel and wrapped it around my hair. I then rushed past Sean and into his closet. I couldn't deal with this right now, I needed some space. I had just lied down when a light knock came on the closet door. Sean opened it a little. Sorry. Are you good? He asked shyly. Please leave me alone. I responded bluntly. What? Why? I didn't respond, I couldn't find my voice in that moment. After a minute of silence he closed the door and left me be. My thoughts raced and my heart was going off the rails. Everything was just so overwhelming and I didn't like it. My memories were slowly coming back though, so it eased me a little. I heard Sean's door open. I didn't know if he was leaving or if his parents were coming to check on him again. They checked in on Sean about 2 times a night, once his mother, the other time his father. Sean, have you seen my red dress with the flowers on it? His mother asked. My body went frigid as I looked down to see the exact dress she was talking about. I want to wear it to work tomorrow but I can't find it, she continued. Nope, he said, sounding like he was busy doing something else. Do you also happen to know where the chicken in the freezer went? I was going to make that for dinner but it's gone, so I have to make pork ribs now. I think my heart stopped for a second time. I felt like I was going to be sick as the memory of what happened earlier flashed before my eyes. What would I even do with a chicken, a frozen one at that? He said in a confused/accusatory tone. The door closed and everything went back to normal. A moment later I heard him get off his bed and walk closer to me. I was thinking he going to ask me to take it off or about the chicken, but what he said instead surprised me. I think it suits you better, he whispered by the bottom of the door. My face went red and my palms started to shake. I dug my head into the pillow to hide the burning of my cheeks even though he couldn't see me. Here I was having a silent freak out and he just up and tells me I look nice in his mother's dress. God damn it, Sean. He leaves the room and comes back with a plate of food. He knocked on my door and opened it, but my front was facing the wall and I pretended to be asleep. He closed the door and left the plate outside. The smell of barbecue pork ribs seeped into the closet, but I restrained myself. I kept thinking back to how good the chicken tasted, the crunch and how chewy it was. It felt good on my teeth after a while. My mouth started to drool, but I then slapped myself so I'd stop. I was freaking myself out as the pit of despair grew larger in the pit of my stomach. I eventually managed to fall asleep. It didn't last long though. I awoke to Sean opening the closet door. He was frantic. Brianna, he said, shaking me awake. I turned over and covered my eyes. The light from his room was so bright since I'd been in the dark for a while. What? I said tiredly. Look at this. He shoved his phone in my face. It was a news report. The headline was about the blockade and the townspeople's reactions about it. The news anchor was in the middle of an interview when suddenly a kid snuck up behind her and nudged the interviewee out of the way. I know that face. I muttered to myself. It was an older version of the boy I had seen earlier. The kid pulled out his phone and showed it to the cameraman and then grabbed the mic from the news anchor. This is my sister Brianna Reed, he said, holding the photo of me in front of the camera. She's missing. She goes to Coleman College and hasn't gone to her classes at all this week. Which is unusual for her. So please, if you have any information, my number is Sean. Stop the video. Brianna, you're missing? He exclaimed. I have a brother. Was all I managed to get out. Why are you missing? What happened to you? He interrogated. I don't know. I yelled at him. I just now remembered I have a brother. That's all I freaking know. We need to contact him, Sean stated. How? I don't have my phone, and what if he calls the cops on you? You'll be arrested for a crime you didn't commit. Not if I explain to him what's happened, Sean said, typing in his phone. A moment later he showed me a text message. It was for Jason, my little brother. It read, my name is Sean Briggs and I go to your high school. I think we share a few classes together too. I saw you on the news and I know where your sister is. She showed up at my door about 2 nights ago. She didn't remember anything, not even her name. She's slowly regaining her memories though, so I think we should meet up and try to figure this all out. Why don't we meet up tomorrow? You pick the place." Before I could stop him, he pressed send. I let out a groan and crossed my arms. A little ding rang from his phone. "Oh wow," he already responded, Sean said with surprise. He said to meet him at the abandoned gazebo that's in the park down the road from your house at 11 am. He sent a location in case you don't remember. "Don't you have school though?" I asked. "It's fine, I'll find a way to skip." He responded, making his way to his bed after turning his light off. "It's pretty late and tomorrow is a big day, so I'm going to go to sleep." "Night," I said quietly. He responded with a sleepy I was surprised he could round down so quickly. He went from 100 to 0 on the spot. I lied awake thinking about what it was like to be Sean Briggs. I tossed and turned in the tight space I was in, unable to fall asleep. My eyes were closed but my mind was going a mile a minute. I decided I'd read something. When I opened my eyes to find my book, I found I could see in the normally pitch black space of Sean's closet. I was irked, but decided to wave it off and read my book so I wouldn't have to think of anything for a little while. I eventually fell asleep in the early morning hours. Sean knocked loudly on the door before opening it. I hated when he did that because he was just going to open it anyway, so there was really no point in knocking. "Why do you have to knock so loud?" I questioned, squinting at his face. "What do you mean?" I tapped lightly. He explained. "Must be amplified in there or something," he said, waving it off completely. "Anyway, I'm going to let my parents drop me off at school and then I'll bike back here and get you. We'll make our way to the park then, all right?" I nodded, agreeing on his plan. I sat quietly in the closet until I heard them leave. I made my way to the living room and watched some cartoons while I waited for Sean to return. He came through the front door at around 9:30 and we started the ride to the gazebo. I rode on the back of his bike and enjoyed the smooth breeze that hit my face as he pedaled his bike. The sweet scent of Sean's shampoo was an added bonus. The bike ride was about 2 hours because Sean lived in the very outskirts of town. We ended up being about 15 minutes late too. Jason was about to leave when we arrived. He stood up once he saw me. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. I backed up behind Sean shyly. Sure, he was my brother, but that's all I remembered about him, not his personality or how he treated me. At the moment I trusted Sean more than I did my own brother. "Bree?" he said with a shaking voice. I grabbed onto the back of Sean's plaid shirt tighter. "She really doesn't remember a lot," Sean said evenly. Jason walked closer, a few tears broke past his eyes. Sean stepped out of the way and Jason embraced me in a giant hug. I was stunned at first, but then the memories came rushing back to me. I remembered my little brother now and I hugged him back. "Jason," I cried, squeezing him tight. "God, Bree, you're crushing me," he laughed as he let go. "Sorry," I said, wiping my tears. "Come, let me explain," Jason said, leading us to the old gazebo. "I had us meet here because something isn't right." He started. "Basically on Sunday night Arthur, Mom's new boyfriend, left without saying anything to Mom or Gary. I vaguely remember the names but couldn't place their faces. The police showed up at the house and told Mom that they were looking for him. He was a suspect in a murder in the next town over apparently. He must have figured out they were on to him and skipped town." "You don't think this had anything to do with Brianna, do you?" Sean asked, looking at me. "I don't know. To be honest, Brianna shouldn't even be in town right now. She goes to Coleman, which is 3 hours away. Her friend notified me that she hadn't gone to class yesterday and was worried. She wasn't at her dorm either. She's an outstanding student who never misses a class. But the other day, when they put up the blockade and stuff, I overheard that guy that was with the police say to shoot you if you went near any part of the perimeter. That didn't make sense to me. I mean, you wouldn't even hurt a fly. You dangerous? As if. Nobody could reach your phone, so when I saw the camera I knew I had to get a message to you. I was going to tell you to stay safe and don't trust the cops." My heart was racing. The authorities were looking for me? Not because I was a missing person or anything? Why was I here in my hometown instead of at school? My mind was racing with questions. Sean grabbed my shaking hand and held it in his gently. I looked at him and blushed. My mind drawing a blank. "Let's head to the house. Maybe you'll remember more if you see home," Jason suggested. We stared the walk to my house. The street definitely was familiar as we walked more. I felt a little more at ease now. I was in a comfortable, familiar, and safe place now. Plus more and more of my memories were coming back. "Weren't you the one who was in a fight the other day?" I heard Sean ask Jason. Jason sighed. Yeah. It was stupid though. Gary started it. He was pissed off about his dad, so he ended up talking it out on me. He got us both suspended for the week. Hey, I think I remember the way home now, I said, walking backwards facing my brother and friend. I'll go ahead of you guys so I can use the bathroom. They both shook their heads in acknowledgement and I started to jog forward. I came upon the green door that led into my childhood home. I opened the glass screen door when suddenly the door opened. Behind it was a tall boy with shaggy brown hair and brown eyes. He took one look at me and the freakiest thing happened. His eyes changed color, but only for a moment. They looked yellowish, but it might have been the sun shining in them. It's you, he said lowly. I took a step back in fear. You're one of us now, aren't you? He questioned, taking a step forward. I took a few more steps backward as he took more forward. I broke into a sprint, who I presumed to be Gary followed behind. Brianna? Sean yelled as I ran right past him. Gary? Jason asked as he saw him chasing me. The two of them took off after us once they realized something was wrong. I ran fast. I could sense the ill intent in this guy. I ran faster and harder than I ever have. Come back. He kept yelling every now and then. I remembered the route back to Sean's and tried to lose my follower by taking multiple twists and turns. Eventually I lost him and kept running until I made it back to the ranch. My heart pumping and my brain on meltdown mode, I headed to the safety of Sean's closet. I hyperventilated as I questioned everything. What did he mean by one of us? I questioned to myself. Why are the cops out to kill me? Am I really dangerous? I made up my mind, I was going to leave Sean. I didn't trust myself with all of the disturbing events that had happened within the last few days. Maybe the police were right and I am a danger. In that case, I didn't want Sean to be caught in the crossfire. I cared for him too much to let that even remotely be a possibility. I took a while to collect myself before I left. Nothing good ever comes out of an irrational impulse. Once I cooled down, I left Sean's closet. I was in the middle of putting my shoes back on when Sheehan returned, calling my name. Brianna, he cried. A confused look crossed his face when I say what I was doing. Brianna? I looked up at him. Whoa, he said in surprise. Your eyes. What? And never mind. What are you doing? I finished tying my laces and stood up to face my friend. I'm leaving, I announced. Why? Is it because of Gary? Jason ended up tackling him and they fought again. It's not that. I don't trust myself around you. I explained. Something isn't right with me. Something very wrong. How do you mean? He asked, stepping forward and taking my hands. I yanked away and stepped a few feet back into the kitchen. I died. I confessed. His eyes widened. That night, when I remember my name, I remember being hit by a car. It was so vivid, there was no way I survived it. I should be dead and unable to move, but I'm standing here. I shouldn't be able to be standing here, I cried. He moved closer to me, I could feel his warm breath on my chest. Suddenly the front door opens. Sean, you better have a good reason for skipping school. His mother shouted as she entered the house, her husband not far behind. She dropped the grocery bag she had in her hands when she saw me. Her eyes widened, an expression of terror took over her face. Sean turned around to face his parents, his face filled with shock. He suddenly turned around and did the unthinkable. He pressed his soft lips on mine and we kissed.